Hello, I'm Dan Beaver, licensed marriage and family therapist and professor of sociology here at the university here at Hayward. I'm going to speak a little bit about the subject of emotional intimacy, primarily in the context of marriage, but it could be in any committed relationship. The first topic I wanted to talk about is the subject of emotions. Emotions are really important in intimacy and relationships. And a lot of times people get emotions and thoughts mixed up. I ask them, how does that make you feel as a therapist all the time? And they say, well, I feel he shouldn't do that. That's a thought, really. How do you feel about it? And they'll say, well, I feel it's inappropriate. That's a thought again. The reality is anger. That's an emotion. Hurt, sad, guilty, anxious, frustrated, disappointed, concerned, worried, joy, pleasure. Those are emotions. Now, why emotions are so important to this subject is emotions, metaphorically, are the blood of an intimate relationship. It's what keeps it alive. Now, when a couple first gets together and they start dating and spending time together or even living together, those arteries are like wide open. They're like a baby's arteries, and there's no cholesterol in there. So whatever they feel just goes right through there. So it's like, wow, this is great. It's a rush, and everybody loves that. That's the high of being in love. But because of mismanagement, because of ignorance, I believe that feeling goes away. And a lot of people just say, well, that's the way it is when you get married. I don't really believe in that. I think it comes from emotional mismanagement. It comes from ignorance. It comes from attitudes that our culture puts out that doesn't really support maintaining emotional intimacy. One of the goals that I have when I speak or teach or work with couples is to learn how to keep those arteries clean, just like you would with a diet when you don't want cholesterol in there. But there are certain attitudes, again, that don't support what I'm talking about. And one of them is that one of the things that I commonly hear a lot is when someone says to a lover, they say, you shouldn't feel that way. There's no reason to be upset. No one else is upset. Now, what's the message when someone says that to a lover? Well, the message is you shouldn't feel the way you feel. And then you give all the reasons why. It's not logical, it's not rational, no one else feels that way. The reason doesn't matter so much, it's the message. You shouldn't feel the way you feel. Now, if you tell a lover that they shouldn't feel the way they feel, my assumption is they'll stop telling you how they feel. They'll shut down. So it's like when you talk like that, you're just cutting those arteries and you're becoming roommates instead of lovers. So the first point I'd want to make conceptually is whatever your lover, spouse feels emotionally is a fact. You don't ever want to debate its validity. I don't care if you understand it. I don't care if it makes sense to you. If they feel it, that's the way it is. So whatever you personally feel is a fact, and whatever your lover or spouse feels is a fact. There's no debating emotions. They just are. Now, another concept in our culture that really gets in the way of creating emotional intimacy is that we have this idea about that there's two types of emotions. There's two lists, actually. There's a negative list and a positive list. Good emotion, bad emotion, constructive, destructive. We have these value judgments about certain emotions. Now, if you have an emotion that you evaluate as being negative or bad or something, what do you think your tendency is going to be when you feel it? Most people would say they try to get rid of it. They repress, they deny, they ignore, they avoid, they try to get rid of it. Because who wants negative, right? So then my comment is, well, where does it go? Does it just dissipate into the atmosphere? Of course not. It goes kind of in a psychological underground. What it really does, back to my metaphor about arteries, is that that's the cholesterol in the arteries. What happens in reality, if you can't express the so-called negatives, it's very difficult to express the positives. Because if you're blocking some emotion, you end up blocking it all. And then you end up with what I call an emotional flat line. Now, I want to make a distinction here. There's an emotion, and then there's the delivery. Like anger, to me, is just another emotion. But how anger gets expressed or delivered could be very negative. I could tell my daughter it's okay to be angry, but throwing the remote control across the room, that's not okay. That's not acceptable. I know you're angry. It's okay to be angry, but how you're expressing it doesn't work. The idea is to give validity to all emotions, and particularly resentments. Repressed resentments do in so many relationships and marriages. It's incredible. Why? Because it's very difficult to be in love with somebody as opposed to just loving them. It's very difficult to be sexually turned on, intimate, romantic, close, affectionate with somebody you hold a lot of resentment towards. which ties into another myth around emotions in our culture. We think that if we forget about it, don't think about it, out of sight, out of mind, emotion will just disappear. Well, it kind of disappears. It goes away kind of in an underground, but it can sit there for 20 years and then all of a sudden come up. I see people who were in Vietnam that's a long time ago, but they're still emotionally there. Or someone that was raped at 19 and now at 35 is finally talking about it. Another bunch of judgments to watch out for around emotions is when you tell somebody they're too sensitive, or they're too emotional, or you're overreacting, or you're making a big deal out of nothing. Now again, what's the message in all those? Well, again, the message is you shouldn't feel what you feel. And the reason is usually in those situations is because you got too much. Usually there's a little thing that happens and then you got all this emotion. So the person says, God, you're overreacting, you got too much. But all that emotion is very valid if you listened to me a minute ago. It may not have much to do with that little thing though. So if I'm 10 minutes late and my wife blows up at me for being 10 minutes late, so I don't go, God, you're overreacting, I'm only 10 minutes late. We make such a big deal about it. See, that's like pouring gasoline on a fire. I don't do that anymore. And I say, all right, you're upset that I'm late. I know it's 10 minutes, so what's going on with you? You're really upset about this. And I said, well, you can't believe what my mother said to me an hour ago on the phone. Really, what'd she say? And then I hear all about her mother. 10 minutes is never talked about. That's just the detonator to the whole big thing. So the opposite attitude, more positively, would be, where is all this emotion coming from? What is it about? Because it's not manufactured, it's real. It just may not have much to do with the stimulus. And I don't know what too sensitive is. That concept I can't relate to. I mean, I went to a lot of sensitivity training to become sensitive, to be a therapist, to be a teacher, classes, groups, everything. I don't know how you can have too much sensitivity. It's like be callous and numb. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. Shoot up a Novocaine, be comfortably numb. No. Sensitivity is a great quality. And I have not figured out what too emotional is. That's another crazy concept. It's like, oh, you're over the limit, too much. I don't know who's to say where this limit is, where you got too much. Another thing that emotions do is they give us power. There's a lot of psychobabble about power, empowerment, and setting boundaries. Where does your power come from? Because people say to me, Dan, I want to be close, I want to be intimate, I want all those things, but I don't want to be manipulated and dominated and controlled and used. I want to be strong. Where your strength comes from is respecting and validating your own emotions again. Because no one can change how you feel. If you're not comfortable with it, what are you doing it for? That's how you set boundaries. Because manipulators and people who want to control you don't care about how you feel. They'll use logic and reasoning, and they don't want to listen to your feelings.